It's not about the amount of money you actually have. It's your energy. Are you dysregulated? You know what I mean? Because I can tell you, whether I had 20,000 dollars in my bank account or $2, I was so stressed out about money,
Yeah.
and I didn't
Yep.
realize it was the dysregulation of anxiety, of pressure, and all of that. That's what's been creating that loop of not enoughness or not believing or feeling you're enough.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of F5 Collective Presents Women in Business. Today, we are speaking with the wonderful Wani Iris Manly, who is the TEDx speaker, an incredible lawyer who has done something really exciting with how she presents the law and actually how she works with people, coaching, leadership, all of it about transformation and being your authentic self. And I'm very excited to have her with us today. And Wani, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Linda. Hello, everybody.
This is so great. So let's just jump into it, Wani. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you came from, the whole thing.
Gosh, it's the most difficult question for me to answer is like where I'm from because I've lived in five different countries and like 15 cities at this point. But my background is West African.
Wow.
My parents are from Liberia. I was born in Minneapolis, but I was only there for the first year of my life. Then I was in Africa. Then I was in Houston. Then I was in Austin. Then I was in Chicago for law school. Then I was in Spain, Italy, Miami, France. So I'm from everywhere. I'm just like a global citizen. But it really is the most. Right now, I'm recording this from Houston. I'll be back in Paris next week. And so it's just, yeah, but that's like my background's just kind of been an explorer. But I've been a lawyer, an IP lawyer and business lawyer for 22 years, actually. I've been an entrepreneur for 18 years. I've had multiple companies. And I'm just honestly someone just trying to live the life that I really want, which ironically, I wrote a book about that. So, but really, this is really what it is. So I'm really with John Lennon, one of my favorite things I've ever heard is like, when he was in high school, the teachers that, gave an assignment and, says, what do you guys want to be when you grow up? And everybody wrote, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be this. I want to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote, I just want to be happy. And the teacher came back and said, you don't understand the assignment. And he goes, no, you don't understand life. And so for me, that has really had such a profound impact on me. Ever since I've actually have heard that, it really changed when people ask me, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? It's like, I just want to be happy, period.
Yeah. Well, then, so with that, what was the impetus to go into law?
So I was groomed to be a lawyer because I was with you.
I'm familiar with those kinds of things.
So, like I said, my parents are West African, and in
Mm-hmm.
sub-Saharan African culture, you just want to. You're either a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant. And, all African women are pretty much nurses, and so my mom is a nurse, and so I never could stomach the hospital, and so the doctor
Mm-hmm.
path was definitely not for me. But my father was actually Minister of Finance for Liberia when I was younger, living in Liberia, and he was very quite well known. And so I just grew up like in a diplomatic household environment when I was in Liberia about like, my parents like being part of like the armed force, things like that. But I was always around heads of state. I was always in the executive mansion, which is like our equivalent to the White House. And so the influence of just meeting like politicians and heads of state and important people and
Mm-hmm.
just seeing like the negotiations, that really planted the seed. And then when I just went to law school, I was in college when Bill Clinton was president. I was in college when it was like Rodney King. There was just, I mean, W. Du Bois was like at our college. I went to UT Austin, like 50,000 students at the time. I think now it's almost 100,000 students. And so there was just so much going on in UT, University of Texas Austin. It was just like a really hyped time. And so just in high school, I just loved things that just gravitated. Like I was in debate. I just love that. Then I wanted to be the whole social justice warrior, like, saving people. Then I wanted to wear like the power suits. And so it was just kind of like a gradual thing. And I just really loved. And so I just began taking classes, just, preparing me for law school.
Wow. So what about intellectual property law was drew you?
So
Because it's
that was
very,
actually,
very specific, very unique.
yeah. So I have to tell you, that was my trademark professor when I was in law school. I was in law school in Chicago. So my professor at the time was an adjunct professor, and she worked for Coca-Cola. And so her job, she had the coolest job on the planet. So she literally went everywhere everywhere, like the swingers of hotels, restaurants, parties. And her job was like literally to go and order Coke. And she would just basically do a litmus test to make sure they were serving Coke with
Right.
because that formula of Coca-Cola is like the email was like, most expensive, trade secret that there actually is, right? Because it's
Yeah.
been such a big competition with it. So the stories that she told was just so intriguing. And for me, I was always early. I knew that I wanted to work with businesses. I knew I didn't want to work like do criminal law or like, family law because it was just way too emotional. Like nobody really wanted the lawyers got paid. And so for
Mm.
me, just like seeing, I like putting deals together. I love contracts. And I just love the whole aspects of like brands, like how your brand, like, with companies and what they're putting out there. And so, thought leadership. And so it was just all of that. And I just, the whole thought about protecting it and, inventions and things like that. I was just like really turned on by it, to be quite honest with you. So it just excited me really than any other area of the law than, when I was going to classes and listening to.
Well, there's such a protective nature regarding it, right? Because it's, you've got these creators that you got to make sure that they're covered and they're handled, and that their IP is
Yeah.
handled. So, what are some of the biggest hurdles and challenges that you've discovered in this when you're helping these entrepreneurs and these creators overcome their, like, overcome in the IP space, really understand what they're dealing with?
I have to say it's very frustrating because I come from a very corporate background. I'm very
Mm-hmm.
corporate. Even though I'm very spiritual. I have a foot in both worlds. But with entrepreneurs, like they just don't think about legal. Everyone wants to invest like $800 million like in coaching, with business coaching, with people who've never actually had a business before. But just because it's like a low barrier, like into coaching, it's not like as a lawyer
Mm-hmm.
where you have to like go through rigorous, testing, things like that. And so they don't quite put the value on it. They wait until things actually happen before they seek out a lawyer. Whereas at the corporate level, corporations, like they just view us as like they're integral to the business. Like before that CEO is going to put out, I'm open up for a business sign, he's going to come or she's going to come into see a lawyer and say, okay, tell me everything I need to know to not get sued. I don't care. They'll come with the checkbook with a check, right? A blank check, like ready to write a check. And so with
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, it's like they just don't value that, but there's just having everybody wants to be an influencer. Everybody wants, there's not an understanding of the reason why you're in business is because of your brain. It's like what you're writing. And it's like out of everybody, even more so than corporate, the fact that you get up every single day, like you're putting out content, you're doing reels, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're launching courses and masterminds and retreats, is like all of that is like why you're in business, why people pay you. That should be protected first and foremost, and it's not just being protected. Then you should not have to like monetize it more than just say someone come and like sign up for your program, pay you like a one-time fee. Like, no, how about you go and take that and license it out to a university or to an
Yeah.
institution or to a company? You know what I mean? And so it's getting that, relaying that vision to entrepreneurs to think bigger, to think more than like send me a link. And I'm just talking like I work exclusively with the online space, and so they're very short-sighted with that. And so yeah, that's the most unimportant, or the most not important, the most frustrating part about working on entrepreneur.
Right. What have you found working with the online space specifically that's unique than other ways of dealing with the IPs and so forth?
Well, I found like, so for me, like I said, I grew up in very corporate, right, business,
Right.
hardcore law, and so I was never like the typical lawyer. I was always very, eccentric, and I'm into astrology, and I'm a Pisces, so I'm dreamy, and so I'm mystical, things like that, and so I'm all about inspirations, point to where that's a core value of mine. I've got two companies with the word inspiration in it, and so for me, it was all, because I'm on a spiritual path and just living on a conscious way that I live and work, was like, okay, I was able to match where inspiration meets law. And so it allowed me to work with entrepreneurs that were heart centered, that wanted to make a difference. And for them, it wasn't all about the stakeholders. Like it was, for them, it's just like them in their shadow, like in their, in their LLC, if anything had that. And so for me, it was just working with people that wanted to make a difference, people that
Hmm.
actually like that thought like me, that we could talk about, hey, Mercury retrograde and things like that. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I also found it with those entrepreneurs, they're very ungrounded. Like everybody just wants to fly, meditate, and it's like no, and you've got to like have these structures, because I get it to a certain point, because everybody loved corporate because corporate is just too rigid in a sense. There's rules, you just can do whatever you want, and so, and I get it, because I left my law firm because I was working 14-hour days. I get it, I had no time, but people don't really realize the reason why corporate is so successful is because of the structures, because they have
Hmm.
solid written contracts by attorneys. They're not going to chat GPT and pulling out junk. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like this.
Right.
It's why they're not gonna tolerate anyone taking their intellectual property or their trademarks, and they're gonna sue you for it. They don't care how big or small you are. They're not going to put up with that. And so that's just, yeah, it was working people that were going to have the same level of conversation. And it was just much more hard. It felt more less transactional because law is very by nature transactional unless you're doing family law.
Hmm.
But for my law, corporate transactional contracts, deals, those are all transactions. And it's like, okay, with what I was working on entrepreneurs is more like, oh my God, I love your vision. You want to help women out of burnout. You know what I mean? I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you were talking about that you have inspiration in
Yeah.
the names of all of the things, and where inspiration meets law is just, I mean, it's such a great name. I have to tell you, it's just such a great name. And so I am curious how, how did you start your, spiritual journey? What was that spark that made you say, oh, you know what? I don't need to conform. I need to be my authentic self. This is going to be important. And I need to actually pass that along to others because I know you speak on it frequently. So what was that kind of aha?
Well, for me, it actually started off with me on a spiritual journey. So I was working for this law firm in Miami, and I had this like really, really, really tough. He was a shark. I mean, he taught me everything I needed to know. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
To the point to where like he was so hard on me, but I realized he actually eventually told me he was like, I'm hard on you because I know you're not going to stay with me. He was like, people like you in my don't stay in Miami. Miami is just too small for you, you know. And so when I left his law, and it was like one of these like mid-sized international firm where everything was provided for you, marble building. I was driving a Porsche. I had the loft and everything like that, but I just had no time at all. I couldn't like go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? It was like because you had to bill for everything.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like when I left the firm and I set up my own law firm, I left the security of that high paying job. I then had to learn how to be, I knew nothing about how to be an entrepreneur, how to get business because everything was given to me, in terms of like my client list. And so I had to learn everything. And so obviously my income took a drastic hit. And I was just struggling, and then I was like, I got into a relationship, it fell off at the very first time, but at that, which was like the worst time because falling in love for the first time, which meant like the business was aside because I was just in my feelings, and so I was struggling financially, and so I started having chest pains honestly, and like at a very
Mm.
young age, I found myself going to doctor trying to diagnose chest pains, and I would go in there and they would look at me like, what are you doing here? And like, you're the youngest patient I've ever seen, like you're a cardiologist, and it wasn't I went to the fifth doctor. He was actually from California, and he was a holistic doctor to where he was like, let's just do a biopsy because I know you're very young, but let's just do a biopsy, like a breast, for your breast. And so they found a lump in my breast, and
Wow.
so I did the whole biopsy thing, but it was benign. And so he's like, sweetheart, you're just stressed out. He said, start slowing down. He was like, it's not worth it. So he introduced me to meditation, and he said, start walking, things like that. And so that's what I started doing. And then I had a Russian friend of mine, he was a Russian Jew, introduced me to Kabbalah. I took a Kabbalah class. I didn't know what the heck they were talking about other than tikkuns. All I remember the red strings. And the books were beautiful. It was beautiful marketing, And then I met my spiritual teacher in Miami. He was from the UK, and he was raised to be England's next prime minister. He went to school with Prince Harry and Prince William. Very wealthy, but he just went on a spiritual path in India, and he was like, "Wait a minute, God, there's much more to life than only wearing Herald suits and have as much sex as you want, and having this and having that." And so that's how I saw the spiritual path. And so when I began that, my another side of me opened up that I wasn't ever allowed to express because coming from a very strict African background, you don't be a writer, you don't. I'm gonna go off on a sabbatical. You mean no, no, no? You're gonna go to school, and make,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so I started blogging, I started writing, and just yeah, things just began to open up. I started becoming inspired. Just started finding a different way to live other than okay, I'm just here to like make money and pay bills type thing.
Yeah. So is that what led to the book? Get out of, by the way, I bought it.
Thank you.
It should be at my house when I get home.
Thank you.
Get out of survival mode and live the life you really want. It's such a great title. So is that what then led to the book?
And, that was actually the second book that I wrote. So then Paris came along, and
Mm-hmm.
essentially what happened with that was really in 2000 New Year's Eve. I woke up on 2010. I just decided not to go out and party with my friends, but to just stay at home and analyze my life, because that was in the beginning of the where like I was, I was broke. I was like struggling because that's when I started a law firm, wasn't making the money that I was making before, and I was in love with this guy. And I just didn't feel like I needed to be out there partying, but like, oh my God, like we do on New Year's Eve. And so I was like, let me
Mm-hmm.
just like, just stay home. And I just looked at my life, and I, looked at what went wrong, what went right. And I began to look at my limited beliefs about myself. And I wrote everything down. I prayed all day long. I was like, God, please help me let go of these limited beliefs. And then the next part of it was like in the morning is what I did. And then in the afternoon, I got out a journal, like I always do on the day of the last day of the year. And it had the word imagine. And I just wrote like everything I wanted to be, do, and have. And I feel like I wrote like what Elon Musk must think like on a daily basis, because he's just such a far out there guy. And that's what I was writing that day. And I was like so desperate for change. I never said I wanted to leave Miami, but I really wanted like a different so I wanted like a different timeline what my life was really going on that trajectory. And what ended up happening was like 3 days later, my whole life in Miami became invaded all these signs about Paris, 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 French this, French that, which is very strange because I had no connection to France whatsoever. My family isn't from a francophone country. I wasn't
Right.
American, just like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs about France. So it was just so bizarre. So, but it was like every single day for 1 year, I just kept getting all these signs. Eventually, I would end up selling my Miami condo. I sold my car. I gave all of these different charities, and I moved to Paris. I didn't know a single person. I didn't know one word of French. I had no plan what I was going to do when I got there. But when I got there, I just was so inspired to write to the point to where I was awakened. I wasn't writing a book. The book was writing itself through me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was being awakened by something at 2 a.m. in the morning to write. And I wrote my very first book in 30 days, and it's called There is Spirituality and Then There's Truth. And it's about being on a spiritual path. What I had just discovered, because my whole life opened up in the last 2 years when I met Patrick from the UK, started going this path of spirituality. And so it was written about if you're a modern day American or Westerner, like walking a spiritual path, because I had come and call all these Indian teachers, things like that. And so I wrote that first book in 30 days, and I spent 2.5 years editing it. And then I got the download. It was to be picked up by a traditional publisher. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went, okay, the research, and I found an editor. She basically told me the book proposal sucked. And I was like, are you kidding me? She was like, first of all, it took me to write the book was easy. To edit was quite easy because I was in Paris, I was inspired. But then when it came down to editing the book proposal, I got really stuck. And
Mm.
I was in the French Riviera writing it, but it took me literally 9 months to create that book proposal. It's just like completely do it. And I was like, I can't. I'm like, I've been in Paris for like 3 to 4 years. I don't know anybody. I don't have any friends, because when you're a writer, as you know yourself, you're a writer yourself, you're just in your own bubble. And so
Yep.
that's like God, universe gave me another book that I can self-publish. And so that book came about, which really has been my story of just living in survival mode of whether it's not having enough money or having the money, because I didn't realize it's not about the amount of money you actually have. It's your energy. Are you dysregulated? You know what I mean? Because I can tell you, whether I had 20 grand, $20,000 in my bank account or $2, I was so stressed out about money,
Yeah.
and I didn't
Yep.
realize it was the dysregulation of anxiety, of pressure, and all of that. That's what's been creating that loop of not enoughness, or not believing or feeling you're enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, so then what led you to want to speak about it?
Ah, it's so interesting, because when I got to Paris, I was just a lawyer. I thought I'd be a lawyer my
Mm-hmm.
entire life. And so what ended up happening was that I joined all these different expat groups. Like, it's what you do when you become an expat, because you need to meet people, right? And there was one
Right.
called Expats Living in Paris, except they were not just a group on Facebook, like the largest group of expat group, but there was also like a publication where like they published like magazines that was distributed at the Starbuckses, at the embassies, at just very prominent locations and institutions in Paris. And so I was never the group I don't really care for, because like a lot of there's something about the Paris expats. Everyone's just very bitter. You know what I mean? And I think it's because it's very different. Like the culture is just so different. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it brings up the worst people. So I didn't spend a lot of time in that group. I just happened to just glance in there one day, and I just saw a post from the editor that said, "I'm looking for interesting stories about how you moved to Paris or why." He goes, "I'm tired of I followed my spouse. I came to study. I'm in love with Paris." And I said, raise my hand. I go, "I got one." I said, "Hey," I said, "I basically moved following signs." He was like, "Wait, what?" And I said, "There, by the way, a blogger in New York just wrote this full spread about me." I sent it to him. He was like, "Can you please write this, reduce it to like 600 words in like 24 hours?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't do that." Because as a writer, I'm very verbose, So I actually had someone help me with reduce it, and I gave it back to him. He published it in the December issue. And like I said, because it was distributed, everybody recognized me in Paris, and so people started
Wow.
reaching out to me. It's like, "Oh my God, I used to girl, the woman with the bald head that moved to Paris is following signs." And people started asking me to speak at their soirees. So I started speaking in Paris, and I was like, it was for free, and I was like, "Oh, I love this." Never forgot I get paid to do it. So then I just started looking at, okay, I started investing in speaking programs to figure out, okay, how to create a speaking business. And so yeah, that's actually how I started speaking. It became, and I realized I'm not just supposed to be doing this.
What have you discovered about yourself as you have, because I do think that once we start to speak and
Hmm.
really kind of put it out there, we start to get insights into ourselves and into the unique people that are drawn to our speaking.
Hmm.
What have you discovered about yourself and about actually your audiences and some of the people that you've been working with?
Gosh, I discovered that I'm so much more than just a lawyer. I'm so much more than what I was led to believe. I'm so much more. There's so much more impact that I'm meant to actually have. That,
Hmm.
believe it or not, as much as I love being a lawyer, as much as it's privilege is given to me, it really is too small of a box for me to be under. I've also have learned how resilient I am, because being an entrepreneur or being a lawyer is not for the faint of heart. Being a woman, own business, things like that, and bootstrapping everything. I've also have just learned that it's all going to work out. We stress out for nothing. You know what I mean? And so, and we do these things, we do such harm to us because we're operating from such a dysregulated space. Like, for example, what Paris taught me was, I've always, there's no plan B for me. For me, I
Hmm.
operate under the mantra of, it's not working, it's not an option. Like, it's going to work. Like,
Hmm.
we don't have, and I think for a lot of like women of color, you just don't have a choice. There is no like trust fund. It's like, it's gonna happen no matter what. Like, there is no parents taking care of you. And so for me, I just learned like how resilient I actually am. And then I also learned as well too why I was sent to Paris, what I was meant to be doing there. And
Yeah.
it was for me to step into the version of myself I was meant to be doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Now, when inspiration meets law, did that happen while you were in Paris and you decided to kind of go back and pursue that?
Yeah, so what ended up, have you been to Paris before?
I've never been to Paris. I've been to a bunch of countries in Asia. I've been to a bunch of countries in Africa, and I've been to England.
Okay, okay. You have to come to Paris. So
Yes.
so Paris is divided into like what they call arrondissements, like neighborhoods. It's just like it's shaped in the shape of a snail. And the sixth arrondissement is like it's called Saint Germain des Prés. It's where all the Americans are, right? And like the main street is called Boulevard Saint Germain. And when I was walking, believe it or not, in front of the Ralph Lauren store, and I got the download of When Inspiration Meets Law to create these legal templates for businesses and to help entrepreneurs. And I did what every entrepreneur does, which is like I ignored it. That was like maybe like 4 or 5 years. I don't know. It was like 4 or 5 years before, like at least 4 years before then. And then what ended up happening was like COVID happened. And right before COVID, I had decided I wasn't going to be a lawyer anymore. That I was going to be a full time speaker. I had written down um, like all the cities that I wanted to speak at, because I wanted to be every week I wanted to be on an airplane. And so that was like my whole list. Because what I didn't well, let me back up. So that whole New Year's Eve thing that I did that led me to move to
Hmm.
Paris, for 7 years after, I never partied at all ever since for New Year's Eve. I always did that ritual because it changed my life so dramatically. I was like, I'm gonna keep on doing
Right.
it until like, okay, I was like, after 7 years, like, I'm gonna start partying again. But that's what and so coming to 2020, that was my whole plan. And then COVID happened. And I was like, and so what speakers did was everybody went virtual. And I hate
Yep.
virtual. I don't like speaking virtual. I like being a live audience, but I also have the foresight to see, okay, the whole world's going to be virtual. I mean, like every business, I don't care if you have a brick and mortar, you need to have an online presence. And then I started looking at the gig economy. And I said, okay, everyone's coaching because everybody's a coach now, but there's nobody has anything legal. Then I was like, aha, legislation meets law. So I actually executed on it 4 years, 4 years later. And you want to hear something crazy, Linda? How love God works. So here it is. I started in 6 years ago. I started into where inspiration meets law. It was my love. What I did in lockdown for 2.5 months. I drafted all those contracts, all those bundles. 6 years later, we're like another virus supposed is coming, or another whatever with this whole new Hunter virus. But actually, like in April, someone actually reached out to me to actually sell where inspiration meets law. I kid you not.
Whoa.
The email said, "Would you consider selling where inspiration meets law?" And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me! You tell me like, because everything is like. Remember, I told you I'm into astrology and everything. Like
Yeah.
the cycles. 25, 2020. I created a company in April because all of my companies are always created in April. 6 years later, April, another looming pandemic or looming, lockdown. Someone asked me, "Would you consider selling it?"
Wow. Wow. Okay, so 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 what do you think about that?
I was like, "You've got to be kidding me!" I had always built it. I had created to sell because as a lawyer, you don't just build a business; you build a business to sell it. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I was very cognizant of it. So I did the whole IP thing the day because when I got serious about it, I got the IP and the trademark. But now I'm doing the whole evaluation process of it and see, okay, I'm evaluating it, getting everything together, and just getting seeing what the company is actually is worth. And so we'll see what the numbers look like. But even if it doesn't work with this particular buyer, they've planted a seed.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Yeah,
And you're right. Cyclical things
yeah,
are, I mean, it's incredible when you see the signs, isn't it?
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
But it's like what you were saying, you were standing in front of the Ralph Lauren store and you felt it, but that you didn't do anything. But
Yeah,
seeing the signs and doing something about it, action is completely different.
exactly. And that was an American designer. He's like the only American designer like on that street. That's why I was like people like the universe, God is always giving us clues, but we're never listening to it. And so, but for me, I do pay attention to the signs, and so, but yeah, that it's really wild when I think of it. I'm like, wow, 6 years later, yeah, it's crazy. Same month.
My God.
I should check
Well,
the
this,
data actually to see if it's the same date of incorporation. It's the same day I got that email about selling my
yeah,
company.
you gotta, because that would be so cool. That would be so cool. Oh my gosh. Well, this whole idea of the transformation and basically change.
Yeah.
And as you well know, change is scary for most people. And I
Mhm.
know that you work very diligently on helping people overcome that fear. How do you do that? What are some of the ways that you have found are most helpful for your clients or the people that you're coaching or working with to help them deal with change?
The first thing is that we have to divorce ourselves from the mantra that it's hard, that it's scary. And I created a framework from the TED talk that I did. Changes everything, and I realized it's all internal because we're initially taught or see change as something that's going to happen. We're all waiting for something on the outside to change for our lives to change on the inside. And I realized, okay, by definition, if you're telling yourself every single day, because I can see within my own self, when I was saying to myself French is hard, I never learned French. Because if
Yeah.
you're telling yourself it's difficult, it's hard, your mind has no desire to push or do something. And so if we can just stop saying that it's hard, that it's scary, we will remove that barrier so that it won't be hard, that it won't be actually scary, just to reach it because our language is very, very important. We don't realize that. The way that we're describing our life is exactly what we're creating for ourselves. And so
Yeah.
the first thing I actually do is to tell people to stop something that's actually hard because it's not. You've been changing your entire life. We
Yeah.
slept. It's 10:30 my time. You're not the same person who you were last night. Neither am I. I'm well rested. I meditated. You know what I'm saying? So yesterday I was there was a lot of anxiety. this, I did yoga nidra this morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? So it's like we're all changing all the time, but for some reason we have convinced ourselves that we're not equipped to do change.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first thing. And then I also too, I really got into the psychology of change, okay, and looking like the brain, the neuroscience behind it, like, what makes us so afraid? And it also because human beings love familiarity. We will stay in situations, even if it sucks, and if it's like, kicking our butts, but we're going to stay in it because it's what we know. And to a certain extent, I was in this for myself as well, too, because I realized for me to lead the practice of law, which is what Spirit has actually asked me to do, is very difficult because it's been my identity for such a long time.
Yeah.
And so I had to recognize that, even though for me, I beg for change, because for me, I don't, are you into human design at all?
I no, but it fascinates me. So there you go.
Okay, so I'm a manifesting generator, so
Mm-hmm.
we're here to follow our joy. And so for me, like it's just, and I just had to realize, okay, okay, what feels good for me, like what excites me, you know what I mean? Which is when you ask with the IP stuff, IP law excites me. It's why I love to do it. And so, I begin to look, okay, why is it that we're like a glutton for punishment? But I realize even for me, the process of even like leaving the practice of law has been difficult because it's been all that I know how to do. Into the ego mind, our minds and are saying, oh my God, that's death. And so meeting people there with compassion, because I understand, okay, you know what? It's not just you can't do it. It's a consciousness. It's like to let go of as well, because your mind's fighting you. And so really understanding how to approach it from that perspective as well to be able to help people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. That's big. You're so right. That fear and those things that our brain tells us, and then we
Yeah.
hold on to them, right? And we own
Yeah.
it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
There's
a
a
fear of the unknown because yeah, for me, I mean, imagine from 2 years old, like you just be hearing law, 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 and it's like okay, you
mm-hmm.
just be a speaker because, and also too, it's very difficult for someone like myself that those of us in like the regulated professions where we spent such a long time in school. I mean, my entire 20s, I was in law school, or I was in a library, I rather. My education cost me 6 figures. I'm still paying for it. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be paying for like the next 20 years. It's like so to be able to let go of that and to and there's a fear of how am I gonna get paid, and there's a fear of losing your status, because law is very well respected, but a speaker, you're kidding? Like, Europe doesn't want to pay speakers. So it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. And so all of those things play a big factor in it. But it's not just even that, but it's just even like you've been doing work for such a long time, it's just a role we've all been playing, but we're so entrenched in our identities that it's hard to let it go. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very true. Now, do you have another book in you?
I do. I do. So I've got four in me actually. But the problem is that, you know, when I first got to Paris, life was just less busy and distracting.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go to a cafe and just write for hours and just like, but it's like I can't now. I've got like 8,500 things to do. But I am going to go back to and publish the first book, the More
Good.
Inspiration Meets the Spiritual, because I think it's really needed right now. So and I've gotten someone to actually edit the form, so I'm gonna put that out. I do have my Paris memoir, which is like 2 books.
Mm.
And I also got a Paris project, which is called Bikes and Stillness, which is a photography book, which is I want like like when you go to these bookstores, you see these like big fashion books like Chanel and Louis Vuitton's like really really big coffee table books, and so I
Mm-hmm.
want one like that. And what it is like basically photographs of me. I've been taking photos of bikes in Paris because Paris has like is a
Mm.
very big bike or velo culture. And so I just whenever I select a bike by itself with a beautiful scene, I've been taking pictures for like years. Because I want to publish that. Like that's my Paris like project. So I don't have to think about it. So those are things I really, really want to do because I realize my path in this life for the second life is to write books and make speeches.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'm going to vibe heavy on that for you to continue to do that. And I hope that this exit that you've got from when inspiration meets law is just everything you hope for. But it's like you were saying, the universe provides. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we
right?
just gotta trust that. We just gotta trust that because we're all control freaks, right? And there's a
Yeah.
part of me like I'm letting it go. I still have the law firm, I will probably keep that, Or maybe I saw that too, but there hasn't been made an offer on that. But we'll just see. But at least maybe have just somebody else run it. But the Grinch Wish means law, yeah, I will definitely look and see that through and see what the numbers look like and what's presented. Maybe just keep the name and license the name out because that's what the IP lawyer does. You know, it's like
Yeah.
you gotta protect it. You don't have to sell everything, give everything away. You can still sell it and just keep the name and let them pay you royalties for it.
I was going to say, if anybody knows how to do that, you certainly do.
Yeah.
You do. Well, this is great. So what I'm going to do now, because I'm being mindful of our time, why don't we do what we call the founder deep dive? So I'm going to ask you about 5 questions, and it's just like, what would you do, Wani, if someone suddenly gave you $500,000?
I'd be in shock. I would be like, I wouldn't believe it. I would be like, are you for real?
That's the best.
I
Yep.
would,
No
I
strings
honestly,
attached.
once I get over the shock of it, I would be like, okay, I would pray and I would ask universe, God, okay, let me be a good steward of this money.
Mhm.
I wouldn't touch it for 24 hours because I realized part of my habit has been like once I get money, because I had a belief that money was evil, which we've all been taught that. And so if you find
Mhm.
yourself like spending a lot of money right away, quickly when you receive money. So what I do now, every time I get money, I don't do anything with it. I don't touch it for 24 hours, you know? Then once I got the insight, okay, how do I be a good steward of this? Then I would just actually be obedient and follow that. I would definitely hire some financial advisors to help me, allocate it, and and just to see what the business purpose is, things like that. It would definitely have a philanthropic aspect of it to
Mhm.
really. I would want this thing for girls in Africa, particularly girls that have been sexually abused because in African countries, because that happened to me when I was a young child by the chef in
Mhm.
our home, and so I would want to do something for that. Probably something with bringing sanitary napkins to girls in Africa, because a lot of people realize that things we take for granted here in the United States is so easy. My mom lives. There's a Walmart, and just I can walk by it here and get plethora of pads and things like that.
Yeah.
But in African countries, girls don't have access to those things like that. It's quite expensive, and so I would want to like do something like that. Um, yeah, that would be a forgiving thing for me, and so definitely want to help women, But I would want to also to invest it, obviously,
Mhm. Yep.
great legacy, and just to do something for the next generation, because I come from a generation of with the work for everything, so just to kind of make it easier for somebody else.
Nice. Okay, so what is one financial or any reality of building your business that rarely gets talked about?
I think it would just be how hard it is at any stage. There's so much in a line of it gets to be easy. I'm like, yeah, it gets to be easy until it's hard until it gets to be easy. But even for being in business for so long, it's still hard.
Yeah.
It's still hard. You know what I mean? It's not. I'm not. It's not. It's just. There's ebbs and flows, and I think there's so much of we want to present ourselves as having all together. I think it's just like a woman's thing. And so, and I'm very quite honest about it, but I don't lead with that. I'm not about putting everything out there, but it's just like, yeah, it's hard, especially like
Yeah.
in the social media where Instagram, everyone looks business to be so easy. I'm like, the people are lying to you, like they're just lying to you. I'm like, I was like, for almost 20 years, I've been. That's why I all work with our founders, and it's hard. It really,
Yeah.
really is hard. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Now, before you jumped off and into doing all the things that you have done, how did you decide to take the leap to get? Do you have now? Did you get outside capital to do any of this, or was it all bootstrapping?
Everything I've done has been bootstrap. All three companies have been.
Oh my
I have never
gosh!
taken any money. And so what I've done is I've always created a company with the intention to sell them. So
So
meaning
then, wow.
meaning it's never been about me. Like
Right.
the law practice I can sell it. Like what I mean. It's the client list. It's the what I mean. It's the intellectual properties and not. I'm not the face of the brand. When information
Mm-hmm.
meets law, it's the templates. It's the bundles. It's all that the IP. The speaking that I do, which is like my French company, is that's called the House of Inspirational Business. That's the trainings, that's the assessments, that's my talks. And so it's never been about, I've always created a business to where like if something happens to me, I could sell it.
Right. So then, how did what fears did you have to overcome when you started doing that?
It was just learning, I've gone through just like not having the money, and it just
Yeah.
really like, okay, doing the best with what does it go? Doing the best with what you got, what you can, whatever,
Hmm.
what I'm trying to say. So,
Yeah.
I've utilized the power of social media. I've utilized storytelling, the fact that I live in Paris, and my story is just quite unique anyway. And I realize what gets me business honestly is not even me posting about legal, it's actually me talking about my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet.
Uh, it's me being very vocal about, because I'm very candid about my beliefs and where I stand about things, because I think in a lot of years we're very polarized. I'm the rebel in my family in terms of like I've broken away from the tribe in terms of like my religion, how I vote, and things like that. And so I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to do what I do for me. And it's like, and I think a lot of people, not I think I see the impact of that is like it gives other people permission to do the same thing as well too. So when I'm sharing, hey, I'm resting right now on South, because in the summertime in the south of France, and
Hmm.
showing people, like my motto is like beach by four, meaning like, hey, rest is productive and highly profitable. People follow that, and so I've utilized social media. I've utilized things that just speaking. I've realized, what, when people see me and connect with me, it brings up my revenue.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you have, do you do workshops and so forth through the Paris company?
I do more speaking. I don't do a lot of
Hmm.
workshops, but I do
Okay.
I do a lot of speaking to groups. Like, so for example,
Right.
like I'm hired on to do like I'm doing a workshop today, which is actually to teach people how to file their own trademark application. I'm speaking for the public library in West Palm Beach, and so yeah. But I would love to do more workshops. But I do a lot more speaking on stages as
Hmm.
opposed to smaller groups. But I'm open to
Right.
any of it. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay. So let's do your business minute.
Okay. The first thing I would say, register intellectual property. Do not wait until you start making money. Stop listening to people, business coaches who've never had a business besides coaching, tell you to not focus on that. That's the very most important thing. You don't have to be using your intellectual property to be able to register. You can actually register with an intent to use. You're not too small to start. In fact, you'll find out quite quickly how good your idea is was once you put it out there. People are going to steal it. Specifically, like black women, women of color, we're just studied quite a lot by so many different industries, and a lot. I mean, I've seen five different posts between you in the last 24 hours on YouTube and on Facebook of black women, their entire like business model, their content's been stolen. So register your things, both copyright and trademark. I would also say rest, and so the most important thing is it's not your traditional business advice, but it's the best business advice in terms of like your nervous system is everything. You've got to be regulated. I highly recommend Yoga Nidra. There's so many on YouTube. I love Ali, I forget her name, but just like, yeah, it's basically where you're just very present with different parts of it. It's like a guided meditation, but you've got to understand like your nervous system is how you create heaven and hell. I mean, heaven and hell, in your business. And so for me, I'm very much about, mindfulness. And that's a big part of like my business training. You've got to slow down to go faster. And so with the whole where we're going with the next revolution of AI, meditation, being quiet and being still is going to be like your competitive edge. While everyone's telling you to like to do this and do that and to download like 15,000 different, claw this and claw that,
Hmm.
that's going to just like burn the hell out of your nervous system. So you've got to be able to be very centered, and to follow your heart and to listen to it. I think we're so used to just following like what we've been told to do, and we just disregard like what our heart. But that is your business bestie right there.
That's cool. I like
Yeah.
that. That's very, very cool. Okay. Rapid five. You ready?
Remind me, that was like when the rapid five was to.
I'll tell you. I'm going to ask you now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, what did you want to be when you grew up?
An actress.
Ah! As someone who comes from one of those acting families, I get you. I get you. So there you go. You'd be great. You'd be great. You have a great personality. You'd be great. Okay, what always makes you smile?
Traveling, traveling. Yes. And eating good food.
I was gonna say, I love that you like every week you want to be on a plane. I just think that's great. It's so perfect. Yeah. What do you know now that you wish you knew as a kid?
Gosh. That your mom is your first guru. You know, that your parents are your very first teachers and your very first guru. And because I'm recording this from my mom's house, and it's right before Mother's Day as well too. So it's a very, very sentimental. It's just to forgive your parents. They're the very best they actually can, and that everything is going to work out. Relax. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm a worry wart. I'm not gonna lie. I just am, but those are just really two things that I just wish I knew when I was younger. I would just be less stressed. And just understand, like, and I don't know how your audience may receive this, but like, I just believe in spirituality, or because I'm connected to it. But it's like your family, it's like you chose them for a reason. And once you come into the understanding of that, like everything else just begins to flow.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think I would
What
go
is
through what I did.
What is your guilty pleasure?
Gosh, lately I have a sugar addiction. And
Anything like any specific like form of sugar or just like anything?
I think it's because I'm in the United States and the food quality is just so different than Europe. And I've been here for a while. Sugar's in everything here because I'm not
Mm.
normally someone who actually craves sugar. And it may be also because I'm not drinking wine a lot, because I do in France, you drink a lot of wine. But when I'm here in the US, I don't drink any wine at all. But I do find myself wanting to eat sweets all the time here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That mean so not anything in particular. It's just like I got to have a this or a that or whatever.
I would say that it would be chocolate covered almonds.
Okay, that's pretty good. I love the cocoa, Dustin. I have to be honest. I do love those cocoa almonds. They're pretty special. Okay, and then cat or dog?
Gosh, dog. Small ones.
Do you have one in Paris? Do you have a
I
dog?
don't, but I probably will, because I'm going to be moving to the south of France when I get back to Paris, and so I'm a little bit torn between the Yorkies and the Dachshunds.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, they're both very cute. I have to admit my favorite dachshunds are the long hair ones because they're
Really?
just oh my God, I think they're so cute and so adorable. And I'm not really a small dog person, but I do they're so cute to me. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Well, if you get a dog, we got to see pictures. I
Yeah.
definitely want to follow up with you and find out what ends up happening with whether you take your IP and you allow people to license it or what happens. This is really exciting. Wani, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and for taking the time. And when do you go back to Paris? When do you go back to France?
I leave on Monday the 11th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, have a great trip back. Good luck with
Thank
your
you.
move.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you. This has been fantastic. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Please check out the link in the description below. You will learn more about Wani and you will be able to get her book. Please, 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 and really follow her journey. It's exciting and beautiful. So we'll see you next time. And Wani, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I do want to say I do have something for your listeners, and so I will provide you like with a QR code. I would love to have a review from them, and then also to within a QR code there is a link to get like a legal audit with my company if they would like for that for their businesses at a very discounted rate, and so that's available for them as well too. So it's all I'll send the QR code to them. And it just like give them like a review on the podcast, and then like there's like a discounted code, or not just like a discount to get the legal audit for your company.
Oh, that's excellent. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, this is perfect. Thank you guys. Please take advantage of this opportunity. You will not be disappointed.
No, no.
Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.